Okay, we're back. So, like I said, no more of that morality stuff. Instead, we're going to start with a continuation of something we talked about in the first video. You remember that whole thing about how missing the mark respects, well, just listen.
I actually have a fair amount of respect for atheists who will say, who will take the noetic approach and say that I look at the world, and this is clearly a world that does not have a God, that does not have a God.
Yeah, that. Well, that wasn't the end of the thought. Here's how it goes on.
Now, I take away a lot of that credit if they aren't willing to say, like, I look at the world and see that this is an evil world.
Yeah.
Because that's what that means. Like, this is a world not ordered towards the good. This is a chaotic world. This is a world in which whatever good there is will eventually come to an end because fundamentally evil will win and it will all turn out to naught, whether it's a giant explosion or, the heat death of the universe or what have you, but evil's going to win.
Hey, it's not over till the fat lady sings. But more importantly, there's kind of a weird assertion at the core of what you just said, which is that natural events that don't work in humanity's favor qualify as evil. I mean, even the mere fact that people's lives don't last forever is, to you, an indication that evil's gonna win. Now, to me, evil is a description of a mind or something that a mind does. It relates to human motives, or if you prefer, the motives behind the actions of intelligent beings, as judged by a particular standard. But while a non-theistic universe contains minds, it doesn't have a mind of its own. If a person decided to nuke the world to oblivion, or if God decided to initiate the end times and send millions of people to hell, I'd be pretty comfortable labeling the perpetrator evil. But if everything ends in heat death, or the sun consuming the earth, or a supervolcano, or whatever, there's no perpetrator. I think we already agreed that Helios and Gaia aren't real gods with minds. So how is it evil? But whatever, as nonsensical as I might personally find it, I do understand that you're operating under a different definition of the word, which includes just anything that goes against humanity's best interests. I guess unless God does it, considering that hell is definitely against our best interests. So this is a key point. I would like the audience to remember that by your definition, not by mine, evil is not just something that people do to each other. It includes natural disasters, diseases, asteroids, heat death, any other tragedy we can't control that ends the human race. Because it's going to be important in a minute. Another weird thing you do here is conflate chaos with evil, even though they're two quite different concepts. I mean, you'd think you'd never seen a D&D alignment table. But then again, it is Satan's game.
But I can summarize the argument from evil in argument I had with my friend about this when I finally realized that he wasn't a philosopher and gave him a simple answer. I spent like 10 years going down a rabbit hole of mistaking the sort of answer he needed, which was, the simple version is, how can God exist if there's so much evil in the world?
No, the simple version is Christians acknowledge that there's evil in the world, so how can God be all good? And therefore, of course, if God is defined as all good, he can't exist. All evil in the world would have been created by God, just like everything else, and although he could have easily uncreated it and fulfilled any goal he wanted to fulfill, he chose not to. Remember, we're not talking about an impotent God here. We're supposedly talking about an all-powerful God who can do anything he wants. He defined the rules of how reality works. So an all-powerful God who creates evil and then sits back and refuses to help, even though it's entirely within his power at no inconvenience to himself and at no cost to any plan that he happens to be trying to execute, cannot honestly be called a good being. Of course, dishonest special pleading is always an option. At best, he might be neutral or apathetic since he also created all the good in the world, not just the evil. But an all-good, all-powerful God who created everything cannot exist if evil also exists. It's not an argument I tend to use myself. I mean, it's valid, but I don't know, I guess I feel like it relies too much on Christian conceptions of absolute morality for my taste. And it so often tends to lead back to that special pleading, Hey, God's defined as good, so he can be as sick and cruel as he wants to be, and it's good by default. And that kind of thing just gets on my nerves after a while. I guess it makes perfect sense to use the argument from evil when you want to show the inconsistency of a Christian's own worldview, which, when it relates to morality, you should be using their idea of morality. But, it's just not my favorite.
My simple answer is that it is possible that God permits evil in order to bring about a greater good, such as, free will.
Free will. The free will to be destroyed by a hurricane or an asteroid or cancer. I mean, you just got done classifying natural events as evil, so how the hell does the existence of natural disasters help ensure the existence of free will in any way? Well, the answer is it doesn't. At all. But, okay, setting that glaring inconsistency aside and talking about human evil, it's required for free will to exist, is it? That implies a lot more than I think you realize. First, it implies that God's not omniscient, because if he knows exactly what's going to happen at every moment forever, then every decision any human's ever going to make was created in advance by God, and there's absolutely no possibility for them to make any decision other than the decision that he made for them in advance. And that means that when he was designing the entire future of the universe, he willfully and deliberately chose the one where the only choice people have is to be nasty to each other, where he could have just kept tweaking it until he found the one where everybody's nice. It couldn't have hurt free will, because omniscience already does that perfectly well, so that punts him right in his omnibenevolence right there. But I've talked about that a lot, so I'm not going to dwell on it, despite the fact that it does screw your whole narrative. But secondly, look, I guess I can understand saying that evil intentions should be allowed in people if you're going to have free will, since you can argue that the whole range of possible human intentions should be available if free will is really free. Although that kind of implies that there's some kind of inherently complete set of intentions, outside of which there can be no other intentions, even in concept, and humans need access to that entire set. Not sure if I buy that, but I'll accept it for the purpose of argument. But evil events that actually get the chance to play out in reality are a whole other story. To argue that terrible things have to happen to people because otherwise other people won't have free will implies that God is not, in fact, the omnipotent creator of all the rules of reality. It implies that there's some fundamental law of reality that even God himself cannot contravene. An all-powerful God who personally invented all the rules doesn't have those kind of limitations. Oh, he wants an all-good world where free will exists? It's easy for him. He's God. He can just make it work out. But hey, maybe even though he's all-powerful, he's just really stupid. So, okay, fine, I'll help him out. I'll come up with one option as to how this could work. He can run with it from there. So hey, God, what's up, man? Just want to point out to you, buddy, you know how you created people physically unable to do everything they might want to do? Like, for example, if I decide that I want to live the life of an earthworm, it's not really going to work very well if I try to live my life wiggling through the dirt head first, eating soil. But I can try, and the fact that I'll fail doesn't say anything about whether I have free will or not. So here's my advice. The next time you get a hankering for some universe building, try this one weird trick. Just make people physically incapable of all that nasty business. Rape and murder and so on. You know, you try to shoot somebody, the bullet just bounces off their head. You can still try, you just can't succeed. And of course, you know, since natural disasters are evil, you better leave those out too. And diseases, and plane crashes, and those pistachios you sometimes find with like the really bad taste. Instant benevolent universe. Easy peasy, you're welcome. Oh, and apropos of nothing, just maybe try not creating Satan next time. Just a thought, you know, take it or leave it. So, good talk, my dude.
Well, and then I said, and I trust God that is in fact the case.
Meaning that you trust that it's the case that God permits evil in order to bring about a greater good like free will. Just in case anyone forgot while I was talking. That was kind of long, I know.
And he said, well, I don't. I said, I know. Argument finished. I know you don't trust God. You asked me the question, I gave you the answer. Yeah, we're done.
Yeah, great. Might have been a slightly more interesting story if it was about you talking to someone even remotely familiar with the topic, instead of just some poor guy who clearly had no idea of even what the argument's supposed to be getting at. Still, after 10 years of talking to you about it, somehow? I mean, somehow this guy didn't even notice that how much trust you have or don't have in God doesn't affect the argument one bit. Because whether you trust God or not, those deep contradictions between his supposed properties aren't just going to politely and magically disappear because in your trustfulness you pretend they don't exist. Alright, that was dangerously close to the morality topic again, and I said I wasn't going to do that, so now for something completely different.
I mean, if you really, really push atheists, they always become hyper-reductionists.
Yes.
And, you know, to the point where, you know, people don't really exist.
People exist.
And there's no such thing as thinking.
There's such a thing as thinking. Well, it's more of a process than a thing, but it's a real occurrence.
And nothing really exists.
Things really exist. Barring, of course, any really screwy scenarios like everything being a hallucination, and I know neither of us believes that, so we'll establish a baseline that stuff is real. Because otherwise, you're right, we might as well not even bother to have a conversation.
Like nothing, you know, the only thing that actually exists is subatomic particles, at which point you literally can't do anything.
Oh, you mean we think nothing really exists that isn't composed of something less complex? Except elementary particles, possibly. Wait a second, do you think humans aren't composed of particles? No, really, I mean, if you think humans cease to exist if they're made of particles, but you think that we exist, then that implies that you think that we're not made of particles. What do you think you're made of, then? Are you just an indivisible brick?
Because you know, but it's funny, they never noticed that, like, at that point, you can't define what a human being is.
Yeah.
Define a human being in terms of quarks. How can I tell, quarks only, nothing but quarks? How can I tell what a human being is?
Yeah.
If you use any words other than top, was it top, bottom, strange, charmed?
Yeah.
Oh, they're one I forget off the top of my head.
Forget human beings. I know you're just going to try to complicate the whole thing with talking about consciousness and whatever. And that's entirely beside the point, because try defining anything that way.
Nothing really exists.
Let's say a table. You're not going to manage it with that, and you're definitely not going to manage it with complex systems. And no matter what you try to define that way, if you try to define something in terms of quarks, you're going to have a hell of a time, considering that quarks are not the only elementary particles, and that assumes that you're just talking about a specific object at a specific moment, and that you're ignoring quantum uncertainty, which you can't. And you can forget altogether about defining any broad, abstract categories of macroscopic objects that way, which is what you're saying we should be able to do if objects are made of particles. So the implications here are amazing. Like, if I were to tell you that my car is fundamentally made of tiny little particles with no inherent carness at all, what, you're just going to deny that because you think that if you can't define the category car just by listing off the properties of individual quarks, you think that that somehow implies that my car doesn't exist at all and so therefore it cannot be made of particles? That's really the level you want to operate at here? I mean, man, I knew you were out there, but I didn't think you were quite on that level of outright science denialism. I mean, hell, even the ancient Greeks figured out that if you can chop something in half and then in half again and repeat that for a while, it makes sense that eventually you're going to reach some smallest component. Hell, even Kent Hovind believes this stuff as far as I'm aware, and I'm pretty sure he's no more capable than you are of defining anything in terms of the properties of individual quarks, especially words in the dictionary.
You will occasionally see people who will say things like, well, the equation doesn't require time to move forward, so why does time move forwards and not backwards?
Yes.
Maybe if you tried being a human being for a little while. Just for a little while.
Just so it's clear for the audience, what Chris is referring to here is time reversal symmetry, which is the fact that, for example, if you drop an egg on the floor and it splatters all over the place, the equations say that if you were to exactly reverse the velocity of every atom in that egg at a given moment during that splattering, it would unsplatter and fall back together into the form of a whole egg. The equations allow things to go both ways, and what that means is that there's no obvious reason why we should always see eggs blowing apart when they hit the floor, but never falling back together in the exact reverse and lifting themselves back up onto the counter. And that goes for everything else that we would associate with the forward motion of time from our everyday experience. So the question that arises is, if the laws of physics don't seem to discriminate between the past and the future by dictating that events have to occur one way but not the other, then what exactly is it that defines the very obvious directionality of time in our experience? It's an interesting question. Now, you, Chris, might not care to ask it, but that doesn't make it invalid. And that's especially true for people who work in physics, or even just who are interested in it. See, the job of physicists isn't just to look superficially at the world and go, that seems to be how things work. No, it's to figure out how things really work and why they work like they do. And as such, part of the job is that they have to follow up on the implications of their theories. And that means their job is definitively not to just be a human being for once, as you put it, or more accurately, to jump to conclusions based on how they feel and how the world just kind of sort of looks, and forget about actually looking for the answers. So whether you realize it or not, what you're effectively asking for here is for physics research to be dismantled and forgotten, and for everyone involved and for everyone who pays attention but isn't involved to just give up. Stop asking challenging questions, stop digging for the truth, stop being interested in the answers that are found, and instead just start assuming that reality goes no deeper than our superficial feelings and experiences. So relativity is super weird and I can't feel it from here, so if I'm gonna be a human being for once, away that goes. See you later, quantum mechanics. Screw off, particle physics. Oh wait, you actually apparently don't believe in that one, as we just established. Yikes. Well, Chris, just because you have a total lack of curiosity and an anti-science mentality doesn't mean that physicists should quit their jobs and conform, sheep-like, to the norm that you indignantly insist on. Because, Chris, you are not their father.
I'm not your father. The lack of belief atheists annoy the heck out of me when they're talking.
Yeah.
To me. You know, like they want to go off and not believe in God someplace, that isn't talking to me about this. Fine. But I'm not their dad. They don't need to give me some dumb excuse about, I didn't actually do anything. I just lack a belief. I'm not going to punish you. I'm not going to take away your phone. Stop trying to pretend you didn't do anything.
Hey, Dad, stop scolding me, old man. I know you're not gonna take away my phone, so shut up. I'll pretend if I wanna. Yeah.
You live your life as if God doesn't exist. I know this. You know this. Everyone knows this. Everyone everywhere knows that you live your life as if God doesn't exist. Stop trying to tell me that you don't actually believe that to be the case.
Incredible observation. Yes, atheists tend to live their lives as if God doesn't exist, regardless of whether they believe he doesn't exist. And the reason for that is incredibly obvious to, everyone except you. You see, when you don't actively believe that something exists, you're very highly unlikely to structure your lifestyle around the idea that it does, which means that just by default, you're going to be living as if it doesn't. Like, do you believe in jinn? Probably not. I mean, you're full of surprises, but I doubt it. And let's also say that you don't actively believe that jinn do not exist. You just kind of have no opinion. You don't even really know what a jinn is. You never really thought about it. So, how are you going to live your life? Are you going to be terrified to step in the bathroom with the wrong foot because there might be a jinn in there to mess with your junk while you're on the john? Are you going to start getting nervous about going outside because a jinnie might just fall in love with you and start harassing you? Are you going to say an Arabic prayer before you go to sleep just to be safe and make sure that no jinn have sex with you in the night? Maybe. If you're insane. This isn't exactly rocket science, Chris. This applies to every single situation where you would act differently if you held a particular belief. You're not going to go around acting like you would if you simultaneously believed there's a god, and ghosts are trying to kill you, and jinn want to get you, and aliens want to abduct you, and there's a monster in the lake, and transdimensional Bigfoots in the woods, and the government wants to assassinate you, and North Korea wants to nuke your city, and your neighbor wants to throw a tennis ball at your head. And literally everything else that it's possible to believe. If you did that, you would be a nervous wreck, not to mention that it would be impossible. And therefore, by default, when you don't believe something, you can't help but act just like you would if you believed it was false. Even if you don't believe it's false. I know that you're desperate for everyone you meet to have a firm true or false, yes or no position on the God question, but trying to push people into these little boxes that they don't belong in just to fulfill that need is, well, it's kind of pathetic.
I don't understand why this is so important.
It's strange that you'll make a video telling lack of belief atheists that they're all lying about what they really believe, kind of like you just did. And then you'll get surprised and annoyed when they contradict you. Like, what did you expect? If someone walks up to you and tells you flat out, here's my opinion, and your very first reaction is to say, no, it isn't, and then you start rambling on about how even though you've never met them, you know them better than they do, and their real opinion is one that they didn't even imply. What do you expect? That they're just going to nod along politely while you lie about them to their face? Or in a YouTube video with an open comments section? Frankly, you should quit complaining and be thankful. You're online, on YouTube, in the public square, shouting about your beliefs, trying to engage with people, but you're making an ass out of yourself because half the stuff you're saying is just flatly false, and these people, in their infinite patience and generosity, deign to donate some of their precious time to you, of their one life, to correct your dumbass, because they're such nice people. Even when their repeated attempts to drive the facts into your block head just get tedious and frustrating. But hey, what do I know? Just a thought.
Their entire project, either whether it's subtracting an intelligent designer from the universe or from an eliminativist materialism conception of consciousness, is subtracting intelligence from the universe, and they claim that theirs is the intelligent, rational position. That always just gets me.
Oh good, we're merging with the Venom Fang X video now. That's just what I want more of. Alright, where to start here? Well, firstly, whether human intelligence is material or not is, well, it's immaterial to how intelligent it is. We're both looking at the same intelligence. We're looking at the same people. We're just assigning different natures to it, different explanations for it. It's like we're looking at a car and you're insisting that it was conjured somehow. And I tell you, no, it was built by the Ford Motor Company. Here's the year, here's the VIN number. And you turn to me and you ask me, why are you trying to make the car go slower? Huh? That's a non sequitur. I mean, no matter where it came from, it's still the same car. And secondly, your point becomes even more bizarre once you realize that basically what you're asserting here is that the most intelligent position possible is whichever one posits the largest number of intelligences, regardless of if those intelligences are, actually real. Like, it's not more intelligent to try to find the most accurate number, it's way more intelligent just to make up a really, really big number. So it's inherently dumber to posit a universe where only things with brains are intelligent than it is to posit one where things with brains and God are intelligent, because that number is one bigger. All right, man, fine. My position is that every particle is an individual little mind, and bacteria talk to me and my dog is an engineer, and member berries are trying to take over the world, and every cartoon character is a real person with a real brain. There. I posited way more intelligences than you did, so my position's like a million billion times smarter than yours. Times infinity. Times 2.
Yeah, no, it really, really is weird, the degree to which they will retreat to there is no such thing as intelligence. You know, I mean, I remember I've made challenges like this. Like, I've never met an atheist who believes that reason works. And then I point out, like, I mean, literally, that reason can be used to know truth.
What you actually mean is that you can use reason to reach absolute certainty and actually be guaranteed to be right? You can reason your way to a conclusion that's so strong that it cannot possibly, under any circumstances, possibly be wrong, and you can know that you've done that so that you'll never have to think about it ever again. And you can use that as the premise for everything else you think with absolute confidence, yeah? You don't just mean that reason is a really highly useful and reliable tool, as proven to the greatest extent that any tool's value can be proven, which is a belief that reason works, by the way, and a belief that at least all the atheists I know accept wholeheartedly. But no, you mean absolute, rock-solid, unquestionable perfection, because for some reason with you guys it always has to come down to all or nothing. God, it must be incredibly boring living in a universe where everything's black or white.
Yes. Not like we can make models that we can guess at and maybe test, and then we'll never know whether they're right or wrong, but, you know, hey, we made this mental model. But no, reason can be used to know truth. I've never met an atheist who believes that once. They all deny reason.
Yeah, see? All or nothing. For example, I believe, firmly, that reason can be used within its realm of applicability to know all kinds of things. I've been doing that the whole way through this video. I dedicated my channel to it, in fact. But every conclusion comes with a probability assigned. Like, what if I say to you that I've deduced that such and such a thing is a fact to 99.9999999 and 100 more 9% certainty, to such an extreme extent that I would bet everything I have and my life on it, even if I thought I would be doomed to eternal hell if I was wrong? Well, it's not absolute certainty, so apparently that counts as a denial of reason. I mean, I really hope I'm wrong here, and if I am, just tell me. But it honestly sounds to me like you're treating that level of certainty as if it's no more meaningful or valuable than zero. It's absolute certainty or nothing. Pure black, pure white, that's it. And I'm guessing that's why you end up clinging so tightly to so many stupid ideas. You evaluate them using your reason, and you think they sound right, and so therefore you assign them 100% certainty and consider them so rock solid that you'll never question them again. And then you take those ideas and you use them as the framework within which you evaluate even more ideas, and so on, and you get further and further away from a worldview that actually makes sense, even internally. And I have to say, as depressing as that is, over these past few videos it's actually brought me quite a bit of joy, so I can't complain too loud. You're something else, Chris.
Yeah. So, you know, so the one thing in fairness, you know, it can be difficult, you know, the lines between man and argument can blur. But at the same time, a lot of, at the same time, there is always something of an implicit reliance on the man himself in an argument, because there's always that reliance on why would anybody bother listening to somebody? It's because you have some measure of trust that that person is worth listening to. Nobody, you know, the crazy guy holding the you know, cereal bowl up to his ear, getting his secret transmissions and shouting as he marches back and forth on the public square. No one listens to him.
You know what? You've got a fantastic point there. I've listened to you for far more than your crazy cereal bowl wielding ass deserves, at least for now. This is actually my 4th video. I also did that a Patreon exclusive one on a few other points that I thought were kind of interesting. And I've addressed most of the best bits other than that, and I'm getting pretty tired of this hangout, so I think that's it. If you like this video, I recommend that you visit list.logicked.com, type in your email address, and you'll start getting emails with my videos 1 day early, and that helps a lot because then you don't have to rely on YouTube's notifications and you're actually more likely to see them, especially if they go down or who knows. And if you really, really like my videos, consider supporting me on Patreon, and here are my $5 and up patrons who get each video 1 day before everybody else, before the email list people too. Everyone who supports me on Patreon and PayPal with any amount are fantastic. They really help to keep this channel going. And last but not least, follow me on Twitter at Logicked. And I will see you next time.
Have a good night and God bless.
You too. God bless. When you're in a position like I am and you're constantly debating them, you see them almost as cockroaches that need to be stamped out.